This is a special edition of WeatherScope, comprehensive severe weather coverage from the Weather Channel.
Tropical storm Josephine is set to slam into the Gulf Coast of Florida in a matter of hours with high winds, a storm surge, and already thousands have evacuated the beaches. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mike Sadiel here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center along with the tropical specialist John Hope. And John, looking much like the big storm back in March of '93 as far as the weather and the associated tidal surge.
The pressure's not quite as low, and hopefully the tidal surge won't be quite as high as that was. But nevertheless, the maximum surge is going to be there in Appalachia Bay, where they're very vulnerable. So from the point where the center crosses the coast to the southeast is where the high storm surge will be, and it won't be until the center reaches the coast.
And we want to get the viewers at home updated, the latest from the National Hurricane Center. And let's show you what's going on as of 4 p.m. Central Time, 29.0 north, 85.3 west. That puts the center about 50 miles south-southwest of Apalachicola, and it's moving northeast at 23. So within a couple of hours, we'll have the center of Josephine on shore. The pressure is down to 982 millibars. And John, do we think this may become a minimal hurricane, or doesn't it have enough time at this point to strengthen?
I doubt if it has enough time. It doesn't have much more time at all. And Mike, we haven't seen any indication all day that it's gotten any stronger. It got much stronger early this morning, and then beginning about 8 o'clock in the morning local time, it leveled off, and it's been about the same all day.
And in the midst of it all, our very own Bill Keneally, he's standing by in Cross City, Florida, and giving us the latest all day long. Most of what Bill's seen so far has been heavy rain, but Bill, what about the winds at this point? Have they started switching direction along the Gulf Coast there?
Mike, we are in Cross City. We're about 15 miles to the northeast of the actual Gulf front, and the Horseshoe Beach area is very vulnerable. I'll get to that momentarily, but you're right. We've not had a whole lot in the way of wind today. We've had an awful lot of rainfall. The puddle I'm standing in, if it gets any bigger, Rand McNally's going to have to put it on the map next year. But the rain, I'm guessing about 4 to 5 inches. The wind, at very best, I'd say gusting maybe 25 miles per hour, but right now gusting no more than about 10 miles per hour.
Now, with all this rainfall coming down today, yesterday, and tomorrow, what about the outlook once the storm moves through the area as far as all that water going into the watersheds, for instance, the Suwannee River?
Mike, that's a very good question. I've heard reports, you guys are talking about all the rain that fell last night and again this morning in the Jacksonville area. Now, to the northwest is the big Okefenokee Swamp, and that's really the headwaters for the Suwannee River and also the Santa Fe rivers up in northeastern Florida. And they're going to flush out down into the Gulf of Mexico. The Suwannee River, by the way, the mouth of the Suwannee is only about 15 miles to our south in the town of Suwannee. And as we well know, it's a delayed reaction, so I suspect we're going to see a slow rising crest, but then a very flat, very high crest, probably for several days.
Okay, Bill, stay dry, and we'll get on the phone right away with Rand McNally, okay? Bill Keneally joining us live from Cross City, Florida with the latest. Obviously a lot of rainfall, but John, as you saw, very little wind at this point.
No, he hadn't had much wind at all, and I was kind of puzzled. I asked an hour ago, well, why the power was out when the wind wasn't any stronger, and he thinks maybe the grid was extended up into areas where the wind had been stronger.
Nonetheless, we still have hurricane warnings posted. Let's get to the latest from Apalachicola along through the Big Bend, including all those beaches there in the Big Bend of Florida, and all the way to Anclo Keys. Now, Anclo Keys is on the Pinellas-Pasco County line, so those of you in Tampa-St. Pete are not actually in the hurricane warning. You're in a tropical storm warning, and we can show you those tropical storm warnings. We've got them all over the place on the west coast of Florida, south to Venice, over on the Gulf Coast, over to Fort Walton Beach, and even over on the east coast, Cape Canaveral, up through Brunswick, Savannah, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head, to Little River Inlet. And John, how about the situation for our viewers along the beaches of northeast Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina as far as once this storm does make landfall, it should weaken?
Well, that's right. There won't be any question, I think, about it being a hurricane anymore. We know it won't be a hurricane. So they're looking at tropical storm force winds, and that's sustained winds less than 75 miles per hour, maybe a good bit less than that. Nevertheless, they had pretty good onshore winds for a long time. They'll continue to do that for a while as the hurricane begins to move, so there will be some beach erosion and that sort of thing.
But should be minimal wind damage,
I would think so. I would think so.
Let's show viewers at home again what's going on. We've got our infrared picture, and here it is. You can see that Josephine is getting very, very close to the coast. Appalachia Bay right in here, right in this area. And John, tell us a little bit about this coastline here, because we know this is very susceptible to flooding, and why is that?
Mike, that area right in there in Appalachia Bay is likely more vulnerable to storm surge than any place else along our Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico coast. The reason is there's two reasons. Very shallow water offshore, not much of a slope to the continental shelf. And the second thing is the concavity of the coastline, which allows water to funnel up there. Now those folks today so far haven't seen very much because the wind has actually been from an easterly quarter and not really onshore. But once the center moves in, there will be an abrupt shift to onshore winds, and that will bring the water in.
And as Bill mentioned, the water in March of '93 went inland 2.5 miles. We had a storm surge at that time of 10 feet. What about the storm surge this time around? What do you expect?
We're hopeful there'll be a little less. We're thinking somewhere in the range of 6 to 9 feet, or hopefully more like 6 feet in most areas.
Well, one of the problems too, John, is the fact that high tide is going to be occurring roughly 11, 12 o'clock tonight, and it looks like right now that Josephine will be making landfall just before high tide.
Well, that's true, but up there in northeast Gulf, don't forget, we don't have a great big tidal range, so it doesn't make as much difference in the Gulf what time it comes in relative to high tide as it would if it were on the other side of the Florida Peninsula, for example.
And once again, John, we just bear out the fact you mentioned the storm surge high is 6 to 10 feet in the Appalachia Bay area. And look at all that rain. Jacksonville, you're getting hammered. We do have a tornado warning now for Duval County until 7:30. Also for Flagler County till 7:15. And we just got a warning, another tornado warning, a report of a tornado touchdown near Hastings. This is in St. Johns County. So northeast Florida getting hit with tornadoes, heavy rain, and already 7-8 inches of rain since yesterday. So another story will be the tremendous rain and the severe weather. We'll keep you certainly updated throughout this evening as Tropical Storm Josephine nears the coast of Florida. Now with more of the rest of the current weather and what happens to Josephine after it moves onshore and moves up the eastern seaboard. Christina has more from the studio.
Currently, of course, you saw all of the wet weather and inclement weather in the southeast with Mike. As we head to the north, we also have a little bit of wet weather scattered through the plain states, even some storminess here through parts of Oklahoma and into the panhandle of Texas. We see that wet weather extending on to the north as well. As we check out a few radars, we can see where some of the worst of it is, and as I